What is going on, everyone? It is Dan over at Tech Marketer again with your weekly newsletter. So I appreciate you all kind of being a little patient with me. I was down for the count with the flu last week. Thankfully, that is long gone and out of this house now. So I wanted to kind of combine a few things that we've talked about recently, right? There's been some question around Adapt API and creating the service tickets inside of AgencyZoom and kind of what that step would look like and what all that process would look like here. So I've talked about this in the past, but now that we've gotten 6, 8 months worth of data coming through, we've got the Zap pretty well fine-tuned now as far as creating the things it needs to create, having some contingencies built in so that if something doesn't happen, you're still getting notified, all of that fun stuff here. So I want to kind of combine the late pay, the non-pay cancels. I want to combine Adapt. I want to combine Zapier paths, right, that we talked about before. And we're also going to introduce webhooks on this one too. So that was another one that was requested um, to get a little bit of training on here. So we're going to combine all of those together into this one newsletter. So it's jam-packed one. I'm very excited for it. So in here, I've got kind of my test one. There is some live data, so I'm not going to click on the individual steps just so that I can obviously populate the Zap here. But the very first thing that we're doing is the trigger coming from Adapt. If you have Adapt API, reach out to Jacob and have him add you into the Zapier integration. It's a private Zap, so you have to be added in order to see it. But the trigger step here is going to be pull billing notices, right? When that comes through, it's going to be things like invoice. It's going to be things like cancellation, pending cancels, payment received, cancel rescind, that kind of stuff. That's going to come in handy in a second too. So what you're looking for specifically is you were looking for the notice is pending cancellation, the type, and then the notice reason, we want to say non-pay, right? So we're looking at this one here, our test. We want to make sure that the notice type says pending cancellation, which this one obviously does. So it's showing here on this adapt step. Now from there, we have this filtering in the paths, right? So if you kind of remember the path video we did a couple weeks ago, we're looking to see if the notice reason exists. And the reason that we do this is some carriers say pending cancel and they'll have non-pay, and others will leave that blank. So I'm looking here to see if this notice reason exists. You can see that it does not, so this carrier didn't send it. So it's going to come over to this path, right? Notice reason does not exist. Now from here, we're just kind of splitting it down, right? The info that we need, we want the notice reason if we've got it. We want the amount due, as long as that's on there. Some carriers, believe it or not, don't even put the amount due. So we have a contingency for that as well, so that we can update those custom fields later on inside of AgencyZoom, right? We're going to do that with the webhooks. So for here, we're looking to see if this notice reason doesn't exist, right? It does not exist. Great. We're looking to see if the amount due exists. So this one didn't have anything in the amount due. So again, this is where these contingencies come into place with these paths. This is where paths can really, really be helpful, right? So essentially, if it gets to this point, it's saying that it's a pending cancel, but it doesn't tell you why, and it doesn't tell you that there's any amount due. So this is when you're going to send yourself a Teams message, a Slack message, an email, whatever, saying, hey, this person exists. They came through via Adapt. It's got a pending cancel, but we don't know why, and there's no amount due. So go investigate it on the carrier website. If it comes through without it and it does have the amount due, right? If the amount due is greater than 0, then it's going to come down here and we're going to keep kicking it through our path here. So again, we've got contingencies. We've got some carriers do last name comma first name, some do first name last name. So depending on if it has a comma in there or not, depends on which path it's going to go down. So this one is just, there's no comma, so we're going to go first name last name. But either way, no matter which way it goes, we're getting to the end point here. So we've got an amount due. We're going to configure this. So we're going to use formatter. We're going to use the numbers. And what we're actually doing here is we're going to perform a math operation and we're going to multiply. The reason we do this is because this is how the amount due comes through. Now, obviously, they don't owe $39,500. What that means is there's no decimal. That's how it's sending it through, is without a decimal. So we're multiplying it by 0.01 so that we have an amount due of $395 or $178.95 or whatever that looks like. So we're going to get an actual usable number so that we can send this to them to let them know how much they owe. The rest of this is just getting first name and last name, so that we can look this person up, right? So all we're doing is configuring some formatter stuff here. go ahead and do this so we can see, if this is a business, if it's not a business. So we've got, over here, we've got last name. We're taking that. We've got first name. We're going to grab that. Usually if it's first name, last name, there's a middle initial. So we've got a step to remove the middle initial. And then this very, very important step here is we're looking for this person on our sheet. So if you remember back to one of my very, very first videos, every time you sell a new policy, that should be going onto a Google Sheet, right? For a number of different reasons, right? It can be a lookup like this. It can be so that you can create a lookalike audience in Facebook to sell to you, whatever it is. But in this particular instance, it's very important because we're using that name to go and find this person on this ID to get their their AgencyZoom identifier. So once we get the first name, last name, we're looking them up here to pull that AZ identifier. And again, we've got contingencies. If they're found on the sheet, they're going to go through. If it's not found, then we're sending a message saying, hey, this person wasn't on the sheet. Go find them. Now, some instances on why they may not be on the sheet here. The most common one is if you have them in AgencyZoom as husband is primary, spouse is secondary, but for whatever reason, maybe they rate better if the spouse is the primary and the carrier, and then the husband is the secondary. It's going to come through with the spouse's first name. They may not be on the sheet that way. That's almost always the reason for it. So you can go and flip flop them in AZ, or you can just go and manually create it like we talked about a couple weeks ago. But here's the cool part. So we're doing this webhooks by Zapier, right? This is something you have to have the professional account for in order to do. What we are doing, and again, there's live information here, so I'm not going to show you the configure step, but I will show you the result of it here. So we're going to go into setup. We're going to set this up. It doesn't matter if it's a custom request, it's a post, right? So your action event can be custom, it can be post, whatever. I always do custom just because that's who I am as a person. But AgencyZoom's API documentation is public. So it will tell you exactly how to structure it. It'll tell you what URL you need to hit, and it tell you what to kind of expect back when you get it. So in this instance, we are using, this login information here, and we're going to get we're going to update these custom fields, and we're getting this, this bearer token here. Obviously, it's not in here right now because it's, gone. Because we haven't run the test here. But when we get to this second step, right, where we are actually updating the custom fields, again, when you're inside of the AgencyZoom API documents, it'll tell you how to structure all of your data, how to put it all together, make it look nice and neat. You are updating the field. It's going to be CF, whatever, 15111, 15112. What those fields correspond to, if you remember a couple weeks ago, we talked about the late pay dollar amount and the late pay due date. That's what we're looking at here. Now, I'm not going to go into details on how to find that and everything. If you want to know how to do that, reach out to me. I'll hop on a call or I'll shoot a separate video for you on how to find the actual field label itself. But what you're doing, you're logging in, right? It's saying I found the sheet. I'm logging in. I am updating the custom fields for that client using the AgencyZoom ID that we pulled up on the sheet, and I am updating the due date and the amount due. And the reason for that is when I create this service request, and I'll kick over into my test account here, right? I want the automation to reference the amount due and the date that it's due, right? So it'll kick this off immediately once it comes into this pipeline. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off just so I don't get blasted with emails. But inside of my test service center here, you can see that here I am, late pay cancel. It's going to update everything. So if I go into the service request, I can configure it here and I can tell it policy number that it needs to be. I'm going to give it the non-pay cancel name with the misspelled summary. I'm going to select the correct service category here, right? So we've got service pending cancel, non-pay cancel, however you've got it here. We're going to put it in the correct stage. We're going to send it to the pending cancel team. And, we're going to put all the description in there on the due date and the amount due, right? And we know who this person is because we are connecting it to the AgencyZoom ID, right? The client ID. That's how it's creating this inside of AgencyZoom. So there's a lot of data that I just threw at you, a lot of information. I'm trying to keep this not a super, super long video, but there is a lot of info here. The main points that you need to hit, right? AdaptAPI trigger is going to be pull billing notices. You want to filter to make sure it's only pending cancels. Then you're going to split it into path on if the notice reason exists or doesn't exist. And then from there, each side is going to be very similar. If it's a first name, last name, or last name, comma, first name, you're going to split everything up. You're going to find that client. It's either going to find them on the sheet or it's not. The end result is always going to be one of two things: a service request being created or a message being sent saying that we couldn't create it for one reason or another, whether it be they couldn't find them in here, it didn't have the notice reason, it didn't have an amount due, whatever. But one of those two things is going to be the outcome of every single path. And you'll see that's exactly how it's set up here. Service request, message, service request, message, service request, message, all the way across the board. So again, a lot of information, a lot of data. If you need me to walk you through this a little bit more in detail, I will happily do that for you. No problem whatsoever. Go ahead and reach out to me, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week. See ya.